Oh, that's real good.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the 11:11 podcast, where we talk everything entrepreneurship related for the culture. My name is Matthew,
I'm Simone.
And I'm Donnie.
and we are the T10 Collective. And we have another exciting episode. We're going to dig in on a bunch of topics, a lot of current events, and really just go deeper into just the mindset of being business owners and what it means today and some of the things that we all deal with. Let's go into it.
I'm excited to talk today. We haven't talked with us, just the team, in a while. But as we've talked to y'all about before, we've all come from corporate backgrounds in different ways and different lanes. And as we've progressed in our entrepreneurial journey, we've definitely seen a switch, right? So in corporate, we've been so trained to walk a certain way, to talk a certain way, to live up to these expectations. And now as entrepreneurs, we are finding out that you don't have to walk this certain walk to get to a certain level of success. You don't have to talk this way to get to a certain level of success. So I just want to open that up to the team and kind of talk about our individual journeys and how we've had to unlearn kind of that toxic corporate culture.
Oh, for sure. I think the first place that I want to start is just even the look.
Yeah.
What professional even looks like. I mean, a lot of us, especially when we starting out like in internships,
Oh,
we
gosh.
remember like you wanted to look so professional and you had to make sure that like you had like hard bottom shoes that looked like this. And
Yep.
if you look now, you know, this is not unprofessional,
Yeah.
but it's being able to figure out what that balance is. And so I just remember, maybe it makes me feel old sometimes, but I just remember how taking something serious professionally, a lot of it represented how you looked. And so making sure you had a certain hairstyle or didn't have a certain hairstyle, or what was looked down upon. And a lot of it, I feel like, created anxiety because you were always worried about, is someone going to take me seriously? Because one, I'm a Black professional, a young Black professional that's starting out, and I want to be able to make sure that I don't get looked at as an outsider, so I have to look the part.
Oh yeah, it was bad. Like back in so for me, this kind of started like in high school for me because I went to a Christian high school and even I remember so of course, our skirts had to be a certain length, all that good stuff. But also down to like guys, they couldn't have their hair like your hair was too long
Yeah,
right now.
definitely.
Like, and you definitely had to be clean cut. Like, it was interesting. And then even as I got older, when I went to Hampton, and this is like a Hampton staple, you learn business professional when you go to Hampton. So I know your nephew is at Hampton now, and I know they told him you have to have a suit, a black shirt, a black tie. That's business professional. And it's a certain building that you can't enter unless you have on business professional. So that was ingrained in us. And as I got older, I appreciated that though. Looking back in hindsight, I appreciated knowing how to show up to an interview, right? Knowing how to present myself in that way. But also now being like, oh, I have the power where I don't have to show up like that. Like I don't have to necessarily look like that to be professional.
Right. Or at least it's remixed. Like what
it's
that looks
remixed.
like doesn't have to be as like straight and narrow.
Yeah.
It got a little bit of a little
little stank on that thing.
Yeah, so I like the fact you brought it back to like earlier in your childhood too, because I have similar experiences. Right, I went to a private school in middle school where we had to wear a uniform, and you when you think about it too, there. I mean, especially me coming from a Caribbean culture and immigration culture, there was a lot of like, okay, we have to kind of conform to a standard of corporate America, and that was decided as or almost envisioned and ingrained in me as success going into college. So my mindset, even going into school, was corporate America is success.
Oh yeah.
So it kind of informs the way in which you carry yourself, what you find value in, even right. So I can remember, Matthew and I, we were king internships at University of Maryland.
Facts.
We were hitting those job fairs freshman year.
Facts.
So like I was interning from I think sophomore year maybe, and I remember like finding the right clothes, not necessarily being able to afford professional clothes. So where can you find the stuff you
Uh-huh.
can't afford? I was learning how to press shirts real early. And then when you're even in the environment itself, um finding a way to kind of operate within that, being on time, so my uncles would always say, be the first to get there and the last to leave,
Yeah.
right? So that was ingrained in my mind as I was starting to intern. So there was a lot of that conformity, but as you grow, as you become more comfortable, I would find these like little ways to kind of influence my own
Mhm.
personality,
Mhm.
right? So I think for me it started with socks. So I
Okay,
would get
okay. You
like,
had the funky socks.
I would get funky socks a little bit. I start there. Then,
Uh,
I would do like the invisible tie where I wouldn't rock a tie, but I would just button my shirt up. Right. So
Mhm.
there was these little things to kind of create my own level of personality, but within the setting. Right. So pocket squares, stuff like that.
Mhm.
So I would find these little ways, but I think to your point, the value you had, and now that you're kind of breaking out of it, it does feel somewhat liberating when you're not in that environment as much,
Yeah.
because now at least personally, I'm finding the ability to be super authentic, more comfortable in conversation, being more willing to speak my mind directly, and kind of rather than kind of like, oh, I'm gonna let them get their idea heard and I might hold my perspective in.
Mhm.
I think it's interesting how your ability to express yourself through clothes also enables to express yourself professionally more. At least that's my experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely did that. I mean, when I had a corporate 9 to 5, first of all, I was the youngest. So I
Yeah.
wasn't coming up in there stuffy dressing anyway.
right.
And
Mhm.
then I worked at a hospital. So it wasn't necessarily you had to be in a suit, but you still
Mhm.
had to look professional.
Yeah.
Oh, I used to come in there every day
Oh
giving
my
them
god.
hell because I was the one, with the colors or maybe a heel here and there.
Yeah.
I
Would
was
people comment though?
Oh, yeah,
Oh
but,
wow.
the comments can be because I also change my hair
Mhm.
often, as you
Mhm.
guys see on the podcast, every episode is a different hairstyle.
So fly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, they would comment, "Oh, you look so spicy today," or you
Microaggressions,
know how that goes.
all
So,
these little euphemisms.
and yeah, but then, from the other, Black people, they like, "Oh, I see you, sis,
Yeah.
like, I see what you got
Yeah.
on," that type of thing.
Yeah.
So, it was liberating in finding my freeness in that, but still also knowing that I had to walk a certain, line that I couldn't cross.
Mhm.
Like, so
It's that imaginary line. It's funny though, Don, you brought something because you were saying with you, it was your socks. I think back on it and I was like, man, you know what it was for me? My shoes.
Mm.
Everybody know me. I've always been about my shoes, not just sneakers, but like always make sure that like my shoes was always on point. And that was my one little thing that now in hindsight, I'm like, yeah, that was me kind of like sticking it to the man where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna be like professional up top, but
mhm.
then you see these J's, I'll have like at the
Got
time
a
it
little
was I can't
sneaker
even think
on.
of what it was, but it would have been something fly where it wasn't like snazzy and colorful like this one,
Mhm.
but it would be something that you would look at it, you'd be like, oh, those are kind of dope. And I see how he did it. But it
Mhm.
was like those little things where to your point, it's like
Yeah.
we use that as a way to be able to feel more comfortable. And now once you feel comfortable in your skin, you could operate at a higher level
Yep.
and be a little bit more creative because now you don't feel confined to like what they're saying you have to be.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
sure.
And we talked about kind of that unlearning aspect. So,
Yeah.
like, what are some things that you do now that maybe you would have never done like a couple years ago? And wow, still in a
Mhm.
corporate setting.
Yeah. Well, I'll answer that in two different ways. I think there is skill sets I acquired in the corporate setting
Hmm.
that I find extremely valuable
For
right now.
sure.
So when I think about wait, like how to craft even simple communication that's effective to the point and can get you to the direction of where you want the conversation to go, very soft skills that you realize, oh, you know what, that was from my first couple years. The ability to even navigate politics, though, we can argue if they should be there in the first place.
Hmm.
But because you've been in the environment, you know what that even means and how to operate within it. So there's not a level of comfortability. Also, having to be thrown into environments where you're the only one.
Hmm.
There is not one setting that I feel uncomfortable in.
Oh my gosh, I feel
Right.
the same
Yeah.
way.
Like I could be in a room of investors, could feel extremely comfortable.
Mhm.
I could be in a room of creatives. I feel extremely comfortable. So it's I think those dynamics are valuable things I take with me. But from a learning perspective, what you're on the flip side, what you're used to things taking time. You're used to having to, okay, this idea has to be ran through a few different stakeholders.
Mhm.
Whereas where you're in a situation which those guardrails don't exist, operating in speed is actually better. So then
Mhm.
it's shifting your mindset to being like, hey, let's just try to test something. Let's get something out there. Let's continue to push on it versus like thinking, and what's thing I have to grow on is being almost overly methodical,
Yeah.
right? So I think the unlearning comes with that a little bit where it's like, hey, these guardrails don't exist in this space. Let's go out, let's try things, let's test things, let's start reaching out. You know, a a coffee and a lunch is just as powerful or effective as you taking 3 hours on your laptop, right?
Mhm.
So, like, the value in the networking and the going out of your comfort zone, speaking personally to meet, those are things that, you don't really think about in a corporate job when you're sitting behind a desk, right? So those elements as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also do think you brought up a good point because the communication, specifically email communication,
Mm.
that was always something that we talked about how we were basically professional interns when we were young. I had my first internship, believe it or not, coming out of high school. I was very blessed.
Okay.
Shout out to Inroads. There's a lot of amazing programs out there. This is
Yeah.
not an ad for them, but they are amazing. They should pay me if this is an ad.
Yeah.
But Inroads afforded me the opportunity coming out of high school. It was super rare where my first real corporate experience was really actually like a week before I actually graduated high school.
Mhm.
But that experience, I was so young. My birthday's at the end of the year. So I was actually not even 18 yet when I got my
Mm,
first
Wow.
corporate experience. And so the same things we talk about looking the part, I already knew I looked young, but I had to make sure that
yeah.
like my communication was spot on because I didn't want to like give it away.
Oh, yeah.
And
Mhm.
so I always prided myself on making sure that like grammar, as Black people, that's something that they try to use against us,
That's
that like we don't communicate the way that people are. So my email communication, especially back then, um, was always something that I prided myself on making sure that like I proofread it and it was like tight.
Mm.
But that's something that even carrying on into entrepreneur world, that's something that I was even just laughing about yesterday, where I was having a conversation about how someone like they communicate like a millennial or even someone that's older, right?
Mhm.
And I was like, "Well, what does that look like?" And they were like, "Well, look at this email. Look at how they said, please advise on this." And I was like, "Is that a dead giveaway?"
Right,
I was like,
right.
"Damn." So I was like, "So curious. What
How
what
would you
should it look
say?
like?"
Mhm.
Right.
And then they were like, "Just get to the point." And I was like, "Wow, like you don't
Yeah.
realize how conditioned you are about that.
Mhm.
Where what I used to think was a badge of honor that nobody would ever be able to say something negative in that capacity, we almost like overcorrected back then.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
now being able to like I could be in J's, I could be in this, but my communication still has to be
Right.
almost like structured to the way that corporate America said that it needed to be back then."
Yeah, it's definitely a way to play it because I used to read over my emails so much because I was so nervous
Mhm.
that if
Mhm.
when I sent the email back in those internship days, like something was going to be wrong, something was going to be
Mhm.
misspelled. Shout out to Grammarly
Yes.
because
Yeah.
that helps me every day. But something that was new for me now, which is hilarious, people cuss way more
Yes.
now, like in
Mhm.
corporate meetings
Yes.
than ever before. I feel like
Yeah.
I was in a meeting the other day and they're just dropping f bombs, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm that comfortable yet
Right,
to
right,
be
right.
cussing during meetings like that.
That
But
was
I
an
think
old
that's
white guy privilege back in the day.
yeah,
Mhm.
and as Black people, we weren't doing that,
Right.
so I still feel weird about the cussing during
Yeah.
meetings. But that's a new thing
Yeah.
happening now.
Yeah.
That's a
It's
real thing. I've personally never I'm thinking about it now. I don't think I've ever cussed in a professional setting ever. Yeah. But no, to your point, I think I think that when you're young, especially, there is that level of overcompensation. And I think for me, even earlier in my career, I was a young dad.
Mhm.
Mm.
So like I was pressing even more on presenting professionally. So like what I was probably overdressing in certain cases as well. Because I remember when I got into consulting, I was like, all right, even though it's like the sports coats aren't necessary, I'm rocking a blazer every day,
Mhm.
Mhm.
right? So there were things that I was doing to overcompensate for the youth, but the fact I was a young father as well. So
Mhm.
things I look back now and because of the comfortability, those things those things don't even I'm not even thinking about that anymore. But I
Yeah.
do remember early on just like this really a lot of the what I was doing was really kind of covering up uncomfortability in a lot of
Mhm.
cases. But I think now even see the way I approach work differently because there's that level of comfort that I have.
Yeah.
So it goes to that concept of like unlearning a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you grow in your skill set and when you
Yeah.
just become more confident in the spaces
Fact,
that you're in, you start showing up differently.
facts.
And I think as you start showing up differently, your authenticity shines through a little bit more. That's something that I'm really big on now is making sure I'm showing up as my authentic self all the time. What you getting right now is what you're gonna get.
Facts.
Hmm.
But how are you guys practicing that in your everyday lives?
You know what? I do think it starts with even what we were saying about the how you dress and how you feel.
Hmm.
I've always been a firm believer in like how you look determines how you feel, and how you feel determines how you act.
Yeah.
And so that authenticity of being knowing that I'm somebody who appreciates J's, I like nice sneakers. So knowing that if I feel good and I feel comfortable, that this is me authentically. And in corporate settings, I would like to believe that, my white and other counterparts, they look at me, obviously I'm a black man, but like I don't have to try to be this like version of a black man
Hmm.
that they're expecting.
Yeah.
They know anyone who knows anything about me, sure, I definitely have a code switch in a corporate setting, but my code switch don't gotta be on 100. Mine is like I'm still a black dude from the Bronx that you're still gonna hear me talk about certain things where I don't have to feel uncomfortable to make you comfortable, but at the same time, me being authentic to who I am is being able to, dress a certain way or talk a certain way
Yeah.
that it doesn't have to be me feeling like, oh my God, I have to make sure I like tuck it all the way in because
Hmm.
my communication now, because I come across hopefully that authentic person,
Hmm.
they respond to me in a way where they feel like they're more comfortable with me because they're like, I feel like I know who Matt is because Matt is not trying too hard,
Yeah.
and maybe that comes with age. I would love to be able to look back at myself at like that
Hmm.
17, 18-year-old self because I know for a fact I was walking in those rooms like nervous and
Yeah.
anxious and trying to like be something. Whereas, like you said, you getting that experience, being more confident in my skills. I know for sure what I bring to the table now.
Right.
Not only do I have the resume to be able to prove it, but I know that there's certain things that you can't tell me about because I know I have the experience. So regardless of it's because I'm a black male or not, I know there's certain things that I could dance around you with
Hmm.
where like, sure, like it doesn't have to be a race thing, but I'm confident and authentic in that because it's like, look, I've done this.
Yeah.
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 No, that's a great point, and y'all hit on a good point about confidence. I think trying to think when that was for me, but I definitely know what it felt like because once you and it probably comes with a little bit of success, but once you're able to kind of get that reaffirmation that I'm nice, I'm
Hmm.
good, I
Yeah.
add value here,
Hmm.
then that helps you. It's almost like it gives you that umph you need where you got your chest out a little more, and now you're walking into the rooms, and it's like I remember there were certain things I would kind of think or recite to myself when I had, larger moments in my career where it's like, hey, I'm not alone because my ancestors are with me when I'm in this room.
Hmm.
Right. So like it was those things I would repeat to myself, or I would think about the journeys of my grandparents and what, my grandfather and grandmother had to do. And I'm like, yo, I'm built for this. So I think it's the reaffirmation of like the triumphs that you've had personally or in your family can equip you to kind of face adversity in space. And a lot of times you're in these journeys individually, right? So you need that. And that's why I think community network and support is really important too, because oftentimes we're the only ones in whatever conversations or challenges we're dealing with. But I think those were things I recall reciting to myself in those moments where I'm like, okay, I need to get through this. Yeah.
Yep. And I do think now we're in an era where everything's so digital. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
it's a lot more brands like we've talked about. Brands are trying to be quote unquote authentic or be able to appeal to certain audiences. And you can spot that in authenticity.
Yeah.
So like in a digital world, I'm curious to hear what y'all think in terms of like how do you make sure that that brand of who you are comes through in a digital capacity where people don't know you. They don't know that the person that they're getting is you, but being able to make sure that you as a business owner, an entrepreneur, are being representative of who you want to attract,
Yeah.
but also not being something that you're not.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important for business owners to figure out how they want to be remembered, right? And then focus on that.
Mm,
Don't try to pull in too many aspects. Figure out what you're comfortable with sharing and what you're comfortable with not sharing,
Yeah.
and kind of play off of that. I feel like a lot of times it's a lot of overthinking. It's a lot of, oh, I don't want to be perceived in this way. I don't want to be perceived in that way. But I
Yeah.
like to say now, I keep hitting this mic.
Might go and
You
punch
good?
back one of these days.
I like to say,
Oh, man.
all the rules are fake. I
Yeah.
that constantly lives in my head rent free. All the rules are fake. So while of course we gained certain skills and stuff from corporate, I still think it's space for you to literally just be yourself. Don't
Mhm.
try
Yeah.
too hard. Like I said, get comfortable with those things that you want to share, but just share. Just put it out there. Just be comfortable, because with that you're going to attract the right audience.
Mhm.
People aren't always going to be like, we talked about this, the people that you think are going to support you probably won't, or probably
Mhm.
will be your least
Mhm.
supporters.
Yeah.
Yep,
Those
yep.
random people that can resonate with your story or can resonate with your authenticity are the ones that you want to bring into your circle or that you want to attract, and the
Yeah.
only way you're going to do that is by fully being yourself.
That's 100%.
That's a fact.
What about people that, like, we aspire to be? Like, for example, I'll give you an example. I would be lying if I said that there aren't people that, you know, these are idols. Let's say like a LeBron or something like that. There are people who you see them maneuver in a certain way, in a professional way, and because of how they're able to strike that balance, you now have a little bit more confidence to be able to know that, okay, like, yeah, I'm not LeBron, but I know that because LeBron paved the way and knows that, you don't have to do it 100%. You could be 50% and be able to still be effective and not have to worry about it because you never had that representation shown. Like,
Yeah.
who are the people for y'all that you look at them in the way that they maneuver in a business capacity and you're like, yeah, I could keep doing this way.
I'm gonna let you go first.
It's a good one. I now, as you were saying it, I was trying to brainstorm. I think that list has evolved throughout the course of my career, right? So, when I was, well, I'm just gonna probably just take it back from just being entrepreneurial business. I'm just thinking like people
Mhm,
who I find inspiration in, right? So interesting. When I was younger, it was Paul Robeson,
mhm,
a gentleman who I thought was a remarkable human being that was a not only a social activist but an actor and an athlete. He was a Renaissance man. So that was someone I found a lot of inspiration with. Malcolm X, someone who was very devout to a cause. And so I found those as inspirations younger. Then from a business perspective, as I grew older, I found those in different ways. So right, it could be athletes like how Kobe can be was so focused on consistency and mastering a craft, or even a gentleman in the entrepreneurial space that was killing it. Tristan Walker was another one I think we
yep,
both would talk about a lot. So they've evolved, but it's taking bits and pieces. So that person necessarily isn't someone who's business or entrepreneurial, but they could be, an activist or a creative. But there's an element that I find inspiration in.
mhm,
So those have been kind of people that have shaped perspective for me, and even people that I will reflect on when I am trying to hold myself accountable to a certain level.
mhm.
Yeah.
What about you,
Yeah.
Simone?
I don't think I have anybody specific, but it's like the type of person. So like the creative who might be on the red carpet
Mhm.
and they might be interviewing celebrities, but you can still feel their personality through what
Yeah,
they have on.
yeah, yeah.
Or like
Yeah.
they may be doing an interview on Good Morning America, but you can tell they're showing up as their authentic self, and like
Mhm.
they add their element. Maybe they're repping where they're from, or maybe they have a certain thing they have on that's just like, yes, like I just know that that's them in their entirety. It's the people that show up like that.
Yeah.
I think that inspire me every day. I think of, it's this a woman entrepreneur. Her name is Ronnie Brown. She's local in the
Mhm,
DMV, but
mhm.
I love her content because I can tell that that's her authentic stuff. Authentic self. People like Gia Peppers, Scotty
Yeah,
Beam, people like that that just show up authentically and
yeah,
just kind of aren't afraid to like break the norm, but they're also paving a way for other young black women who are
yeah.
looking at them as peers or as aspirational people, just to say, okay, they showed up as their self, like kind of like Lisette was saying. I want to be remembered as somebody that tried, that did it, and then people can look back on it and say, yeah, I can do that too. I don't have to walk, like we said earlier, walk a certain way, talk a certain way, but still show up as this grandiose black woman taking up space.
That's a
Mm.
fact. Do y'all think that that Gen Z and the next generation, the same way that we are thinking about it so intentionally, that they are thinking about it that way? Because in conversations that I have with them, with folks who are Gen Zers, I think they for some reason, which is probably a good thing, they don't understand the pressures that we talked about of like, well, to them it's just like very black and white. It's like, well, why do I have to like look a certain way to work in this environment? Like that's just
Mhm.
not the job for
Mhm,
me.
Mhm.
And that's the freedom that we always wanted, right?
Mhm.
So it's a good thing.
mhm,
But I'm always interested to know if the same way that like you aspire for a goal and you're like, all right, I got to do it this way. For them, do you think that they're going about it in that same level of intentionality that we were back then?
So this is not to shit on Gen Z,
Yeah.
but Gen
Disclaimer, Jizzy,
yeah,
this is not that.
disclaimer. But Gen Z, I feel like I love the way that Gen Z moves as far as like you said, they are liberated in their freedom.
Mhm.
They are not conforming to the norms. They're coming out doing their thing. Um, but no, I don't think they're being as intentional
No?
about their goals and the things that they're trying to get to. I think they're motivated by money, the look, the feel of it. I mean, as we all are,
Yeah.
right? But I don't think there's really like, okay, I have to follow this plan. It's kind of like free flowing. I'm gonna
Mhm.
go with the flow, whatever the wind pulls me that way or this
Yeah.
way. I think that
mm,
they probably I think everybody would benefit from finding a balance.
Mhm.
Having that liberation, but also knowing that without some form of intentionality, that you can't bring something to
Right.
fruition that way.
Right.
And that's also why I think a lot of Gen Zers are disappointed so easily because
Mm.
they expect everything to just fall in their lap a certain
Mhm.
way. And just reality,
Very
things don't
interesting.
happen like that. Sometimes they do, but
yeah.
Yeah.
most times they don't.
I think there's positive and negatives. I mean, I don't wanna paint a broad brush at all, but, that's possibly I think the liberation might lead to more creativity as well, right?
For
If you're
sure.
if anything I learned recently, right, it's important to take chances and try things early. You learn from the mistakes and then you pivot and you adopt. So there could be some benefits that come from that as well,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love Gen Z. I think that they're super innovative. And honestly, I feel like I kind of moved in that way too. Like,
Mm,
I mean, I up and quit my job when
yeah.
I was, I don't even remember how old I was, a few
Yeah.
years ago. But still being young and still
Yeah.
taking that
Good.
leap is a very Gen Z thing to do.
Facts.
Um, and so I do think it's power in taking that leap earlier and
Yeah.
kind of putting yourself out there earlier just to see what sticks. I
Mhm.
mean,
That's a fact.
it doesn't hurt to not to try.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, I think that the next generation, regardless of it's Gen Z, because it's even interesting, are they called Alpha? Is it the one right after them? Like, what's it
Oh,
called?
I haven't
Forget what it's
even
called, but like just
beyond
knowing,
me.
the point is that like obviously every generation, the youth pretty much change the rules to be able to have it,
Hmm.
the next generation
The
be
power is in
effective
the
at it,
youth.
right? But Gen Z for sure may have made a name of themselves being rule breakers, right? And just like we're all saying, like there's good in it because they are breaking down the rules of what a whole generation, really like a whole institution said that it had to be, right?
Hmm.
But now what we envision corporate looking like and what we
Mhm.
envisioned a lot of these career and traditional career paths looking like, it's not going to be the same. And a lot of that is because of Gen Z and the next generation. So I'm just really curious to see if outside of them wanting it sooner, is it something that they are going to the foundations that some of us as millennials and being able to like set a standard. If they chopping that down and like, nah, this is how it's done now. I'm very curious to just see like even what entrepreneurship looks like, being a business owner looks like,
Mhm.
because I think it has evolved so much so quickly.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how things evolve, especially in that business world. I think that certain ideations can start when you're young, but those big decision makers are still old, right?
Yeah.
So like I think it's going to take time to see what that full circle moment is going to look like in
Mhm.
business, but I love the direction it's going in. I mean, breaking
Mhm.
down those corporate barriers and like that how you have to show up type thing. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting on a round table recently, and I think to your point, Simone, the structure of the institutions are still ran
Mhm.
by older people, right? But I think they have to now consider new things.
Yep.
So there is almost like this race of arms to be more inclusive and more equitable in the way you run your organization. Things that were never even prioritized are
Definitely.
now being prioritized, and
Mhm.
soon they're becoming going to become normal because what's been proven more than anything is that the workforce right now, especially the young one, it's very transient, right? People are staying less in one spot, and if
Mhm.
they're going to want to stay, they want to feel like they're being part of an organization that has a mission. So what it is, it's making decision makers now have to adopt to that. So I think there are positives you're seeing in organizations having to have a mission,
Yep.
having to be equitable, having to create uh, cultures that are actually more fair and that treat their employees fairly. So you're seeing, you know, people like us reaping the benefits of that now. So I think you'll continue to see that adoption more forward as well. So that's I think some positives to get out of it.
Yeah, I think so too, especially because people aren't afraid to get up and quit their jobs now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So now it's like, okay, you don't want to treat me right. I'm I'm out.
Right.
Like
Mhm.
it just is what it is.
And that and, so the flip side of the authenticity, the first sign of inauthenticity
Oh my
in a
God.
mission,
Yes.
I think that is something that we're seeing
Mhm.
a lot more of where if someone's like, "Well, your mission statement says that you are about this, this, and this," and on social media, you put up posts saying that you are in support of Black women,
Hmm.
or you're in support of diverse voices, or LGBTQ causes, but you did this, that didn't match up with that. You did that, that didn't match up with that. So, I'm out because you're not who I thought you were or who you say you are. And to your point, Donnie, being able to like now these companies are actually being held more accountable by the workforce to be able to say the same thing that was able to be used to attract them could be the same thing that if you don't actually walk that walk consistently, you could actually lose that talent and that whole workforce without it.
Yeah, that's actually a little bit why I ended up leaving my job.
Mm.
It was in the midst of, when all the George Floyd stuff
Yeah.
was happening, and it just didn't feel authentic.
Yeah,
It felt like, and I say this all the time, they had two Black girls running their social media, but we had to tell them what to say or
right,
kind of like how to react in a way. And that's how it felt. And
right,
so that kind of, I mean, I was already getting tired of
right,
working. So I was already like, okay, I might not be here for long, but
right.
that definitely pushed me to say, oh, it's my time. I'm
Mm.
good.
Mhm. What do you think as business owners that we obviously aspire one day to be able to create those big companies?
Hmm.
What are the things that we need to be mindful of to not end up creating that cycle that, you start on the path and it's all good and all gravy where it's like you can pay attention to those small details, but if you want to scale, ultimately you're going to one day become too big that you can't really be intentional about all those aspects.
Hmm.
What do you think we need to do in order to be able to strike that balance?
It might be like a line of communication thing,
Mm.
just within like your business structure, leaving time or spaces for open feedback. Listening to people that you bring on your team, that sort
Mm.
of thing.
Right,
Kind of that's the only way in my eyes that you could probably keep a pulse on it
right.
Yeah.
to really know what's going on in your organization,
Mm.
right?
Like
Yeah.
true diversity of thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're probably all in that space where we were early in our careers. Like, man, when I get in that seat, I'm going to do that differently.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I now in a position where I have the opportunity to make more leadership decisions. I think you have to hold yourself accountable and be self aware to your actions.
Mhm.
But a lot of it also goes to, when you're scaling, you have to think about scaling to what cost,
Mhm.
right? So, you can scale in multiple ways. If you choose to go the way of getting investors, you have to also understand what that entails, right? So the moment that you accept someone's money, you then have to also consider their perspective on your business, and it's less of yours now.
Mhm.
So it's maybe also being more intentional about the investors you partner with, the organizations you work with, and then also consistently being authentic, right? So if your mission and values are this, they're uncompromisable,
Right.
and that will stay consistent no matter what size you get to.
Yeah.
And then also just like be clear communication, being listeners, right? I
Mhm.
think I have been surprised at how, by not being tapped in to teams and people that you work with, how easily things can get misconstrued.
Oh, yeah.
Small, large, middle-sized environments, right? So I think making sure that you are tapping in, consistently communicating, and offering an opportunity for transparency, I think can allow the ability to keep folks together and mission aligned. And then, when as you scale, as you grow, consistently being, aligned to what you're in it for,
Mhm.
right? I don't think there's this space where you can grow and scale, but be compassionate at the same time. I don't think that has to not exist. And there's
Mhm.
organizations that are doing that now. Now, I think there's a lot of organizations that try to pretend that they are,
Right.
Making it
right?
hard.
And they ain't really doing it.
Right.
But I think that's an opportunity, because if you're able to show, no, I'm authentic
Yeah.
to a cause and I can still grow, there's a space for you. And so I think it's being authentic, being mission driven, and being, when you're being intentional about who you hire, who you work with, who you seek investment from. Yeah.
That's a fact. It's gonna be really interesting just to see how the landscape evolves over the years. I mean, we're
Mhm.
definitely seeing that culture is moving at such a quick pace. Technology is making, you can go from 0 to 100 really quick.
Mhm.
But it always makes me think about that Jay-Z line where he's like, that Dark Knight feeling, dying to be the hero, live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Mhm.
Those mission-driven companies that started off as a challenger, when they become so big
Mhm.
that they stayed around long enough that they then became the villain that they were
Mhm.
trying to
Mhm.
slay. So it's gonna be interesting to see as time and companies grow, um, how are they able to combat it? What are they taking into account the things that we're saying? Because I know for our business, that's something that we're very intentional about.
Mhm.
And I know that we'll continue to be accountable to each other to be able to make sure that those negative things don't happen. But just being able to adapt to what's going on. Who knows what the next thing in the cultural zeitgeist is going to be? And how do you adapt as a business owner to be able to make sure that you can still be relevant, but also still have something to say that is going to matter and be consistent?
Yeah.
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 Facts.
Well, team, this was another great episode. I
Mhm.
mean, we could talk for days on this type of stuff. But that's a wrap on this episode. We're really thankful that you tuned in, and check us out for the next episode because we have way more on this topic and more to offer. And make sure to give us a like, a follow if you don't already. And the number one thing that you could do is to share. We want to be able to make sure that this message and these topics that we talk about are able to reach the ears of as many people as possible. And that's possible through you. So thank you again for tuning in. And it's another one. Peace.
Peace.